Welcome to the Roots lesson for horticulture. Please make sure that you have your notebook open to the Roots section, and you are going to take notes while we do this lesson. So please make sure that you pause when you see that you have a note to take. Okay, so question number 1 says, what are the 4 main functions of a root? But before we get to that, I want you to brainstorm and just think about some roots that you might eat. Okay, some of those might be carrots, beets, radishes, ginger. Okay, like in ginger ale, that's a root that comes from the ground. It's called ginger. If you eat sushi, okay, that tan stuff that you put on your sushi, that's ginger. All right, so question number 1, what are the 4 main functions of a root? So the first one is that they grow below the surface. Now, a reminder, as in previous lesson, that a lot of times there are exceptions to that rule, but generally roots grow under the soil. They provide the stem and leaves with water and minerals, and it's extremely important that the water and minerals go straight to the leaves because that's where photosynthesis happens inside the leaves. And photosynthesis needs water and minerals in order to be able to produce the food, which is glucose, which is also a natural sugar. The third one is they anchor the plant to the ground so that if water rushes by or if there's a strong wind, it doesn't just rip the plant right out of the ground. And then the last one is they store food and nutrients. So when there's a lot of sunshine out, they do tend to make a lot of food during that time. And if they don't need that food right away, they're going to store it inside the roots and in the fruits so that when it comes to not so sunshiny days, they can access that food and eat it. All right, so question number 2, what are the characteristics of a fibrous root? So fibrous roots, as you can see, they are thin branching roots coming from the stem. So this would be a corn plant. So here's the stem of the corn stalk. Then all of this right here would look like little tiny hairs or fibers. Those are all different types of roots. That is a fibrous root, which means many roots. So examples would be corn roots. Another example would be grass. If you went outside and ripped a chunk of grass out of the ground, you will notice that they have a lot of roots to their system. So that would be an example of a fibrous root. All right, the next one, it says, give me 3 examples of a fibrous root. Do not reuse my example. It's okay. Just put corn and grass. That's all I'm looking for. All right, for question number 3, what are the characteristics of a taproot? So the next one we're going to talk about is the taproot. So this is a vertical growing major root. It is one vertical, meaning up and down root. What they tend to grow off of them is less important roots, what we call, and they're just as important really, we call them secondary roots. So if you have ever looked at a carrot, right, this is how a carrot grows in the ground. But if you've ever looked at a carrot, you will notice that they have lines going down them. Well, that's because carrots are too big to absorb water out of the soil, which is the job of the root, right? Well, so they end up growing these little secondary roots off of them, and those secondary roots grow little tiny hairs on them, which are responsible for absorbing the water and minerals out of the soil, transporting it to the main root, which would be the carrot or the radish, and then it travels up to the leaves where it can make photosynthesis. So examples would be carrot, a beet, or a radish. All right, the next type is called, so question number 4, what are the characteristics of an adventitious root? So adventitious is they basically can grow a whole nother plant right off of any part of their body. So you will see that this is a strawberry plant. The strawberry plants at the end of their season will get these what are called runners. And those runners, as soon as they hit soil in certain parts, they will end up growing roots, and then they will grow a whole nother plant off of that. You could actually, if this plant is stable enough, you can cut this runner right here and have its own separate plant. Now, eventually that one's going to create a runner, which will then root. Strawberry plants are an invasive species. they will take over an area because of this ability. So you have to make sure when you're planting strawberry plants that you plant them inside of a box and you maintain them, because if not, those runners will actually come out of the box, and as soon as they hit the ground, it's going to start growing a whole nother plant and it'll take off from there. So the example would be a strawberry plant. Another example would be a sweet potato plant. Okay, in the beginning of the season, my kids planted 2 sweet potatoes, right? Because if you cut them in half and you make sure that the end that has the roots on it, you bury that in the soil, it'll grow a whole nother plant. Well, then that plant will grow runners, which will then plant somewhere and root. And then that root would end up turning into potatoes, and then so forth and so on. All right, so just a little review. We have types of root systems. Now, let me explain this. In the very beginning, so we began by learning that there are 2 types of plants on this planet. There's vascular and non-vascular plants. We mainly care about the vascular plants because that's what produces our food, and that's what we mainly come in contact with every day. So there are 2 types of vascular plants. There's the angiosperm and the gymnosperm. The angiosperm will produce flowers. The gymnosperm will produce cones. Now, there are 2 types of angiosperms, flowering plants. They're called dicot and monocot. And there are a lot of, you can look at every part of the plant to figure out if it's a monocot or a dicot. They have certain characteristics. So with that being said, when you're talking about taproots, it's mostly going to be a dicot. And if you can't figure it out from the roots, then you would move up to the stem. And if you can't figure out from the stem, then you move up to the leaves. And then if you can't figure out from the leaves, then you move to the flowers and then the seeds. Okay, but we'll talk about those as we go on in our lessons. All right, primary root grows and becomes stout. Secondary and tertiary, which means secondary and third, grow from the prominent root. So this would be your primary, this would be your secondary, these would be your tertiary. All right, fibrous roots are predominant in monocots. So if you pull it up, like a corn stalk would most likely be a monocot. A grass would be a monocot, but grass doesn't flower. So I guess it would eventually if we let them grow big enough. Roots develop from lower nodes, and they have the same length as diameter. Adventitious roots, they basically develop from the organs of the shoot system, which, remember, anything above the soil line is a shoot. Everything below is a root. All right. So hopefully you guys understand this. If you do not, please reach out to me and I will help you understand it a little bit better. And if you have any questions, let me know.